Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. It's Thursday, it's the 21st of May 2026. Celtic are the champions of Scotland. Went all Drew Galloway there, unbelievable. But we are here and we're going to talk about what has been a crazy week in the world of Celtic and the world of Scottish football. We're going to give lots of praise, Stuart, to a fantastic Celtic team, management team, fans, all the top gear. Stuart Duggins here.
Steady on. They don't all deserve praise, but I'm delighted and I'm keen to try and redress.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Dearie me.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, no. I was going to say I'm excited to try and be positive about what was such an incredible week for everyone and try and steer it away from the controversy, but we're also here to talk about the controversy. I'll take a controversy head on.
Yeah, you can steer away. I'll steer us right back in. Barry Gallagher's also here. Hello, Barry. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. It has been a crazy week in the world of Celtic. We got there eventually. We maybe weren't the most confident of panels, but as we always say, delighted to be proved wrong. And just the way that Martin O'Neill sort of carried himself in defence of the support over the last 4 or 5 days has been the mark of the man, really. So all things are feeling good. Obviously a cup final to look forward to at the weekend. So yeah, delighted to be here with you tonight.
Great stuff. We're going to talk about obviously the game. We've got some news. There's some breaking news, both Celtic related and non. Why are you both looking at me like that?
Well, it's exciting, isn't it? Breaking news.
Okay, good. Yep, lovely.
Just to put a picture, Stu did the hand on my leg like Terry Henry to Jimmy Carragher.
So why don't we start? Like Stuart, you said you wanted to start. Like, talk us through what your thoughts were in regard to maybe the team not getting enough kind of praise for what was a mammoth performance.
Well, I just think that I didn't think Celtic were going to win the league. I don't think, in your heart of hearts, maybe you hoped they would, but there wasn't a lot of evidence. If you go to the Dundee United game, that was easily like the 6th or 7th time that team had really, really let you down with like a proper gutless nothing performance.
Yeah.
And to think that they could go on a run of 7 consecutive wins with basically like escalating difficulty of the fixtures was unthinkable. And I think that you have to look at the season in context, the ups and the downs. It's not a vintage Celtic team, but I think that so many individuals, when the chips were down, really, really delivered. And, you know, none more so than Martin O'Neill, obviously, dragging us through it.
You pointed at Barry there as if you went none more so, and then you pointed at
Barry Gallagher, of course.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, absolutely. No problem.
And I just think that with some of the, let's call it politely, disappointment that Celtic have won the league from the rest of the world, it's been very easy to try and grasp at low-hanging fruit of, you know, a conspiracy here, a tainted title there, just because, you know, it's not quite gone how they wanted. And I think that that's been the prevailing narrative over the week, which I don't think Celtic fans would really be bothered by, but it's also just a shame that I do think it was a real like mammoth effort from the players, even in games when they weren't playing well. The sort of never say die attitude is really, really commendable. And I think there's lots of little stories peppered throughout that, whether it's a guy like Kelechi Iheanacho who had, you know, properly discarded, didn't really have a team, didn't really have a future in professional football, who's come in and scored some of the most clutch goals that we've seen in recent times. A player like Daiza Maeda who has underperformed but literally put his body through hell to make sure that he would deliver a title for us, and the emotional cost it took on him, all the way up to like a player like Callum Osmond, who's had such a bizarre first season in professional football where he's had huge highs, really shocking lows, and then he's the one that kind of drags you over the line. So I just think there's lots of really amazing individual stories, and the collective story of Celtic coming across the line is not getting perhaps the credit that it deserves. And that's fine. I understand that people will be like, oh, boo-hoo, you've won 14 titles out of however many, blah, blah, blah. But I just think it's important to stick, before we address all of the audios, that's a really amazing thing that's happened, and I certainly haven't taken it for granted, and it's been brilliant.
Barry, you were at the game on Saturday, as I was too. Have you ever felt such palpable energy in a football stadium?
I don't think so. No, it was all range of emotions. So obviously you go in nervous before the game. You see the stadium was pretty full early on, I thought, as well, which is unusual. Normally,
I was in an hour and a half.
no, you putting the cones out. And then just as it got closer to kick-off, just the tension was building. I know we'll come on to this, but I thought we started fairly well. And then when Hearts get that goal, you just start to think, oh God, surely we can't come from behind again. But Mick McCarthy, we can.
We can.
And perfect timing of getting the equaliser before half-time. And then it takes that wee lull or dip again, because I remember looking at the clock and it was like 81 or 82 and I was like, God, this is going to get away from us. Suppose my only consolation at that time was there was going to be a shitload of injury time because of their antics. But again, the tension of, is it offside, is it not? Luckily I was able to get a signal for once, and I think I was texting, your brother replied to say it looks like he's on. And then I don't know if it showed this on the TV, but the Celtic bench react before his announcement, so I think they could see clearly that it was on. And then I've said this to a few people this week, but see when you realise that there's no goalie in, that prolonged celebration is something that I don't think I'll ever forget. Like, the scenes there were incredible because you knew he was going to score. You still obviously have a louder roar when the ball goes in, and then just knowing that you've done it. And like Stu says, like, there's a story right there to be written. Like, journalists should be pouncing on that, but they're not, because they didn't get the fairy tale ending that they want. But for us, it's a fairy tale ending. I think the banner said it all is a fairy tale about this club, and that's just another one that we can add to the sort of roll of honour. So, yeah, really proud to be a Celtic fan. And just kind of lastly, I remember like kind of growing up, and maybe the older support would say like, oh, we need to like watch ourselves because we've got this reputation to uphold. But I remember always thinking, see Celtic's enemies, they hate us even if we are squeaky clean. And it's been proven that when maybe some fans have stepped out of line, they're going to report what they want anyway. So I totally agree with what Stuart's saying. The team do, and the club deserve more praise, but people are going to hate Celtic no matter what, and frankly get up them.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Can I just add on something quickly to what you were saying about Callum Osmond? Can I just give you a scenario?
Oh yes, please.
Imagine, I'll take both of your opinions. You obviously said as soon as you see there's no goalkeeper, would you feel like celebrating, and would you feel like celebrating with confidence if it was Mikey Johnson?
Oh,
there's just no guarantees.
Mikey Johnson's sitting somewhere in the Midlands, like
shots. Like,
what did I do?
Like 50 Cent.
What did he do? Well, League Cup final. That's what he did.
I thought you were going to say Shun Yamada.
We also won that League Cup final, to be fair.
I know, but he still missed that.
It's a fair point. But
well, that's probably not going to time for it, but if we went through the whole squad, would you be confident if they scored? Michael?
See, it's funny because I wonder, he taps it in about 8 yards out, but there's a part of me that was like, if it was me, I would just run into the goal.
Yeah, I'm taking no chances.
Hit the net, my face hits the net, you fall in amongst the net just to make
out
sure.
Injured again for another 6 months.
The performance itself was, like, what I found was when Celtic go behind that, I just thought, I liked how the support reacted. Because there's been times this season when we've went behind and getting the players' backs, you get, there's kind of wee pockets of kind of issues around the stadium of people kind of shouting at each other and, all that sort of stuff. Chaos. I felt everyone took a breath, didn't go over the top, Barry, and supported the team. I thought it was great.
Do you know what? It really reminded me of Martin O'Neill's first era in the early 2000s when, see, if we did go behind, particularly in Europe, as the players were getting the ball to kick off again, there was that big roar, and I noticed that as well, because as you say, that hasn't often been the case this season because there has been such turmoil, so that really did enthuse me. And I think that there was a togetherness in the stadium. Like, I know that O'Neill mentioned the unison, but I think since that Falkirk game or the night game, and it really felt that we were back.
It was when the GB got back.
It just reminded me, and probably I think O'Neill's alluded to things like that as well, that it did kind of feel like a real throwback. I know people mentioned that with the Rangers game as well. So yeah, and it obviously worked because we're back on level terms within 3 or 4 minutes.
Absolutely. Just in terms of, obviously, I mean, we win the game, There's some really good performances. I thought someone like Engels in the first half was appalling. He was atrocious. I thought he did well to kind of keep it together in the second half. I thought McGregor was really good in the final stages of the game. Kelechi Iheanacho, you mentioned, Stuart. He came on and everything he touched turned to gold. It was just an outstanding performance.
Yeah, it was men against boys stuff. His touch, he looked world class, to be honest. Like, balls were getting fired in at him. Didn't seem to matter where it was. He was bringing it down and moving it on quickly. He was also getting in everyone's ear. Like, he was very demanding for the ball. And I think that you mentioned Engels there in the first half. If you had criticism of Celtic players, some of them looked scared and some of them looked like they didn't quite know how to go about doing what was required. Austin Trusty is a really obvious example because he was put in the spotlight almost exclusively from the first half. But I thought there was just lots of players that stepped up, and the pace and the intensity with which we played, I might be wrong, but I feel like that's maybe in the last, let's say, 25 minutes, I feel like that's maybe the intensity that Celtic normally play at, or that we would be used to them playing at. Like, if you think about the best of Rodgers' team last year, I think we kind of did play that fast, and so we look like
he's looking at us like,
did we?
See, just as you say that, sorry to jump in, but see, like in the film Hook, where it's like, there you are, Peter.
Yeah. There you are, Celtic. It did feel like they just went through up a couple of gears, and I talked about this a little bit in the agenda. For everyone that wanted Hearts to win, ultimately, I think that Hearts team are just not good enough to win the league, and I mean that not because of refereeing decisions. I think it's very admirable how good a season they've had, and it's impressive, certainly from where they were the season before to where they are now. But I don't think that they just have it. That they have enough individual quality, enough collective quality, probably a good enough manager, genuinely, because of it's very easy to take shots at Derek McInnes, and we absolutely should and will. But I just mean, I think he made some tactical errors in the game that I think a better manager probably wouldn't. And I think that it just really showed the difference between the two teams in those last 25 minutes, that I think you do end up with a fairer result. And we're going to talk about the fallout, and everyone wanted Hearts to win, and I've thought a lot about that. Like, is it just that they wanted the fairy tale? And I think that it is probably within the context of the season that Hearts don't just represent another team winning the league. I think they represent a team that's had a really good season in a season when Celtic and Rangers have underperformed, and thus the perfect storm has been created to win the league. And if they can't get over the line, then what chance do an Aberdeen, Dundee United, Hibs, whoever? And I think that maybe it's that awareness that's what's really deflated people and perhaps sent them mad.
We call them plankton, Barry.
We call them
plankton for a reason.
See, just on that, so see when you were saying about Derek McInnes, I don't know if you remember, there was it might have been an open goal or whatever years ago, and it was Josh Windass. And remember that game at Ibrox where Scott Bain went in and Rangers took the lead?
We're going to win the league.
That was Derek McInnes put in the managerial performance to match that. Like, you just think we're going to do it now, but they lose their head.
Yeah.
And I think nothing signified it more was when they made that change as soon, like straight after half time.
Well, 10-0.
And then it came back to haunt them, didn't it, because of injuries. And also, just on Kelechi, it's interesting for me that his goals have been so crucial, but I think hands down that was his best performance for us without a goal. And you can see in the footage as well when he's running through, he does well to keep up with Osman, but it's almost as if he's talking Osman through it the whole way. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
And just the way he was, just the way he carried himself and carried the trophy around the pitch. What was it? If you need a trophy, come find me. Yeah. And I would hope. I don't want jumping ahead here, and I think tonight probably will be a bit over the place, but I would start him in the cup final. I think he's deserved that.
He blocks. People don't remember he's the one who wins the ball.
Yeah, from Cammy Devlin, gets out to him,
and he makes that pass. And I think I love Kelechi Iheanacho. I really do, and I think he's one of those guys that he may not be here for long, but I think you'll remember him for a long time.
Oh yeah. Can I ask you a question just on that instant? Do you think in Cammy Devlin's head he saw stars and he thought, I'm going to ping this in 25 yards? Because that's fucking insane.
I saw a clip of that just before we came here, actually, and people are saying he actually has 3 players on the right hand side who are in space, and he thought, I'm going to win the league here again. Josh Windass, but Kelechi, he's worked great. Like, maybe things that we've he's been criticised for, but I thought he was all over the place. He was, God love him, he was trying to press, but it was almost as if he took it on his shoulders. And now I understand what senior man means.
Don't want to go into too much detail with this, so I'm just looking for a yes or no, right? Because we'll cover this a little bit more as the summer kind of opens up. But do you think Jinky will beat Celtic next season? Clinch you, Natso, Barry?
I would say yes.
Sure.
I think no, but I would absolutely have him. I think that depending on what happens with the managerial situation, if it's O'Neill, he'll probably look at it and say, I just cannot have a player that can't play more than 45 minutes of football. So I think maybe no, but I think he's written in history.
Yeah. I suppose as well, just to kind of build on that, I think if you do get like a, God knows who the manager's going to be, but if you were to get like a sort of progressive, for want of a better word, manager, probably no as well. But I just feel there's so much business to do that would be an open goal. Pardon the pun.
And I think obviously if you look at, you know, the fact that he has contributed, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence of whether I think it'll be happening or not, but we'll talk about that.
Maybe he scores a hat-trick on Saturday and we have to give him a new deal.
I just want to talk about, so people talk, obviously saying about Celtic won the league because they cheated, and we'll come to that and stuff, and we won the league because referees gave us, you know, lots of penalties and blah, 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 right? But here, Hearts lost to Celtic away 3-1. The away game before that was a 1-1 draw. They obviously beat Hibs 2-1 against 9-man Hibs, but the away game before that was Livingston, which was a 2-2 draw. The away game before that was a 1-0 loss to Kilmarnock, and obviously the away game before that was the 4-2 defeat to Rangers, and also the loss to St Mirren. I mean, what are people complaining about? They dropped a hell of a lot of points in the last couple of games, Stuart. Like, this is a team that, as much as people wanted, like, you can, as I say, the narratives about, you know, the splitting, not split, I hate that fucking phrase, split in the old firm, because it's so ingrained in my head because I see it so often now. But, you know, beating Celtic to the title, first team to win it outside of Glasgow since, you know, Alex Ferguson and all that stuff, they just weren't good enough.
Yeah, I think that is what it comes down to. And you know what, they might end up being, depends on, you know, the Tony Bloom project over the next 10 years. As they've said, they think that that's achievable. I think that it is achievable. I think if you have a Celtic board that act the way they do, and if they don't maybe learn the lessons from this season, I think it's possible that Celtic can have another bad managerial appointment, another 2 bad transfer windows, and, you know, all the civil unrest that you've had between the fans. That's absolutely possible. I just want to say, I think you're right, but we still win the league. I think if they have any of that... But all I mean is that I think that you have to presume that it'll be interesting to see what their business model actually looks like, because so much has been made of the Jamestown analytics. I think the more savvy kind of commentators have noted that it's not really been the Jamestown players that have done that. I know that Braga's going to take a lot of headlines. Braga's form over the sort of back end of the season has not been anywhere near as good as it was. Kizarida's definitely not, and his numbers do not reflect that of someone who was this, you know, good business, don't get me wrong, but you've seen his likes before, and I'm sure you will again in the Scottish League.
It was Shankland and Halkett and Finlay, and it's the guys who were already there.
Exactly, Devlin, like even like Blair Spittle has come up with like important goals, and these are players that have been in the league for a long, long time, and already you're starting to see what their business is going to look like. Both Hearts and Rangers very publicly saying that they want to back like Scottish talent. You can use whatever word you want for Scottish. I know Barry knows the P word I'm talking about.
Players.
Yes, that's the sort of Scottish players that they want. Players. Calvin Miller, I don't know if it's done or if it's happening, but he's going to Hearts, so that this sort of like, let's pick up the best of the rest in Scotland, and then we'll pepper it in with some like random, you know.
See if they're back, with all due respect, then I think Calvin Miller, I think, is a good footballer at a good level. If Hearts buy him expecting to win the league, I don't think that's like... No,
that's true, but you know, he had the most assists in the league, and I think if they are looking at it...
He was at Tamworth Town before that. I just think Tamworth Town to Falkirk to then the step
could have been at us though in January.
I think he's a good player.
I think that's a smart signing.
Yeah, that's a smart signing. But then, for example, if they start bringing in say Brighton buy some Brazilian striker and they don't want to blood him in the Premiership and they send him up the road. That's where suddenly you have, like a 20, 30 goal striker and players like that can make the difference. So if they want to be progressive and also if they're going to put in more of a coach than McInnes moving forwards, I don't see that happening overnight. I think that this has been an anomaly because of the season that Celtic and Rangers have had. Even the numbers back that up. It's one of Celtic's lowest points tallies of the last 10
long time, aye.
Well, I think what?
You looked at me as if I had the answer. I don't know.
Oh, do you know who? I think it equals Rodgers' second season.
Oh, God.
I might be wrong on that.
I
saw it. It might have been an AI thing, so don't know, trust it. But
did you see someone, just sorry to jump in, but did you see someone asked Rodgers if he would get a medal? And he was like, no one from Celtic's been in contact with me, but I'm all focusing on is finishing as high as I can.
I imagine Rodgers sitting there, I can't remember if I said this in the agenda or if I said it to you privately, but I thought it a lot, that he's probably sitting there going, well, I brought Kelechi and Nacho in, I won them the league, completely ignoring the fact that he didn't play Callum Osmond at all for a second in professional football.
In 2017-18, which was Rodgers' second season, we got 82 points.
Yeah,
man knows his stuff.
One of Lennon's seasons was like 80, I think.
Was that the season maybe at Barca maybe as well?
Yeah.
Remember Letterman used to it's probably a smart thing to do, although it wasn't great to watch. Remember he used to play weekend teams the week before the Champions League?
I remember going to a game, I can't remember if it was just after Barcelona under Neil Lennon or just before where we played Kilmarnock and we lost.
Oh yes, I remember.
And it's genuinely one of the worst.
Ambrose made a mistake, I remember that game. I didn't comment.
Barry, celebration, pitch invasion, if you want to call it that. I wouldn't call it pitch invasion, but going onto the pitch and celebrating, and what have you made of the fallout with all that stuff? How it's been responded? You were in the stadium, I was in the stadium. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I would tend to go along with what Martin O'Neill said. Like, obviously, I think people are excited and right or wrongly they've spilled onto the pitch. What I don't like is like people taking selfies and stuff because there's no time for that. Like, get off.
Aye.
But I'm not going to criticise people too much, like, because it is raw emotion. It's been built up. We've all said how tense it was, so I wasn't on the pitch probably because I can't really get down to the bottom.
The old knees, aye.
But I think it's just been deflection to take away from the real issues. Like, I think that's maybe from the Hearts' point of view, they probably know themselves. There has been a few, been listening to Clyde one a lot this week, and there's a really sensible Hearts fan that phoned last night and said, that's noise. It's like our form, like Stu mentioned, had really killed them. But it's not even the Hearts fans I'm annoyed at, it's the wider I don't want to say the wider footballing world, but just everything from that penalty decision at Fir Park to wanting the game replayed, and just anything to take away from Celtic winning it, because, as we've said all pod, the fairy tale was written for them. But it's just been too much. I'm kind of fed up with it now, and I know we're going to come on to what came out tonight, and hopefully that will put some of it to bed, but I don't think it will. And what I've noticed more than ever this week is, see these sort of football accounts on Twitter or whatever, like using the image of Dyson with the line and saying how the Hearts have been cheated, even though that doesn't tell the picture. Using the stills of the guy pushing Frankie Kent when he's standing on his phone, but not addressing that, so it just looks like the guy's attacked him first. People will just write their own narratives, and see when they're presented with facts after it, they don't reply. It's a bit like Gary Lineker presented with things, and he's got his engagement out there by saying that last week about, this is one of the worst decisions ever, when arguably in England over the last week or so, there's been far worse decisions taking place. So I'm glad that we can all see through it, and I think some sort of neutral commentators are starting to see through it now as well, but the narrative's already been written and there's not much we can do about that. But it just makes it, in some ways it makes it sweeter for us, because you can see how much they're hurting and how much they hate Celtic.
Yeah, we did a We did the agenda on Monday. Stuart, you were on the agenda, and then we talked through it. Stuff's came out since. But are you still surprised that it's still going on? Because it's still going on, talking about comments about the game itself, the pitch, good people, players going on the pitch, Hearts being cheated, all this stuff. Are you surprised it's still going on at this point, Stuart?
A little bit. Where I shouldn't be surprised in Scottish football that people. If you think about, I think we talked about it maybe last week, the Alistair Johnson handball a couple of seasons back in the Rangers game. That was over an international break, and it was like the full 2 weeks people were talking about it. But this particular type of controversy, if you will, I can't imagine losing a league the way that Hearts lost the league, especially when you've waited on one for 60 odd years.
Yeah.
And I think that there are those that have just accepted that and moved on, and then there are those that just cannot accept it and are literally probably grieving for it and going through the stages. And I think having something like this to paw at is probably giving them some sort of comfort. And then I think you've got, quite frankly, just crackpots and most of the Rangers fans. Barry, you might have heard this as well, talking about Super Scoreboard. There was a brilliant one maybe last night or the night before. Marvin Bartley was on, and this guy was just talking about how he doesn't recognise Celtic as champions and Hearts are the rightful champions, and it's a disgrace, and
everyone should applaud Hearts onto the pitch to
exactly
the people's champions.
And so he's really going on it, and
it's insane.
As they do, they're sort of like, it's like a cat with a fucking ball of string or whatever. They're just letting him go, and they're playing with him. And Marvin Bartley's like, "Can I ask, what team do you support?" And he's like, "Rangers." And he's like, "Oh, right, you're a Rangers fan. Okay, cool." He's like, "So when you're talking about these incidents, it's corruption, isn't it? You're saying it's cheating?" And he was like, "Absolutely, yeah. It's never a penalty, a handball, blah blah." And he's like, "Can I ask you, when Livingston were at Ibrox, what did you make of the Fernandes handball?" And he went, "Oh, I think the refs just missed it." He's like, "Whoa, do you see my point that maybe the ref just missed something?" And he's like, "No." And I think it's. Obviously, I don't really have sympathy for them, but I think it's wild how
they're broken.
How broken as a fan base sections of them are. I know Rangers fans that are much more level-headed and understanding about the whole situation. Oh, my name's been jotted down there. But yeah, people that really firmly, actively believe that there's a conspiracy, and that we talked about it on Monday, that the best way to enact this Fenian master plan was to hope that Celtic got a throw-in in the 95th minute that created this kind of controversial decision instead of the Stonewall penalty that they could have had in the first half. So it's just mad, and I'm really, really pleased that Martin O'Neill has defended the support and the team and the achievement as robustly as he has, because the board are never going to do that. And I think you have some managers that probably wouldn't either, because they don't really want to get their hands dirty. So it's really nice to see that he's speaking the most sense of anyone.
We, as I mentioned on the agenda on Monday, we do the Cynic.co, which we produce about 30 podcasts per month. This week we've had the agenda on Monday, which was fantastic. Myself, Stuart and Lorenzo, breaking down all the news and all the stuff from the weekend. Then on Tuesday we had the debrief, where myself and our analyst Will, we looked over the game from a sort of stats and tactics point of view. Wednesday with the Celtic Women's Football Show, that the women's team are having a really tough time, so Claire and Lorenzo discussed that. Tomorrow we've got the weekend update, where we'll look ahead to the game with Dunfermline. But on Monday we talked about Michael Stewart. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but he's still going on, Barry. He's still going on. He was insinuating, and then not insinuating, and then insinuating that there's something, in inverted commas, that we need to speak about that's laying below the surface. He was just insinuating that Celtic were given the title. Yeah,
he's unhinged. I totally agreed with what you guys were saying on Monday. Like, even Chris Boyd would be distancing himself from Michael Stewart. Like, whoa, like, you're a bit crazy, mate. And just that whole, like, he's fed up, he's done with Scottish football. Like, where else is he going to work? Like, how often have we said the pundits in this country run the game down?
Sorry, I just had this image of him with Andy Gray and Keys on Dubai. See them on beIN Sports.
He would not last out in that sunshine, I'm telling you that. But it's just crazy, and I'd love someone to really probe and say, what do you mean by this? Something untoward going on? Like, tell me what you mean. And they wouldn't, because they like to dance around. And these are the kind of things we spoke last week about. These rile up fans. And you would think after the news came out last week about John Beaton needing protection and all that these guys would choose their words a wee bit more carefully, but they don't care.
Yeah, just on that, I was joking on Monday that I've been just consuming every last little bit of content going, like it was going out of fashion, and I've never watched it, but we reference it sometimes, the podcast that Charlie Mulgrew has with Kevin Thompson.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to hear what Mulgrew was saying, because I know that Mulgrew was there when Michael Stewart made those comments. And Ryan Stevenson was on the panel, and again, we've sort of criticised him probably quite fairly for some of his dramatic statements. And he was saying that on the way up to do that podcast there, I think it had been like a radio thing. Maybe Connie McLaughlin had phoned and was like, do you think that perhaps the media have a role to play, or have had a role to play in some of the scenes that you saw at Celtic Park, and some of the goading and some of the way that, you know, fans went after certain players? And to be fair to him, he said that he hadn't thought about that. And then after he was put the question from her, he thought about it on the way up. He's like, maybe I need to be a bit more responsible with what I say in terms of how you put that across. And I haven't heard any real contrition from anyone. Boyd has sort of dialed back his rhetoric a little bit in terms of the stuff that he's done with Sutton and Naismith since. But I do wonder if you had a situation where Celtic have just won the league and there hasn't been all that ill feeling about these decisions on the Wednesday before, if you haven't had McInnes coming out saying it was disgusting and implying that there's been this conspiracy, if you hadn't also had Hearts fans goading the Celtic team bus earlier in the season, maybe you just avoid that, and maybe it is a few fans going onto the pitch to celebrate with the players and nobody's talking about any sort of assaults or attacks. And then even if there are, to wrongly report them, or to report them with such, you know, in such a robust nature with no proof, it's really dangerous. And someone like Michael Stewart has already been reprimanded by the SFA. I just think that broadcasters will step away from them because it's not worth the hassle.
No, absolutely not. We're going to get to some quotes and comments from Martin O'Neill, from Tony Bloom, who I dislike immensely. But I want to... There was some released audio today from the SFA, and we're going to play it now.
Now, happy defender.
Header for me.
Looks good.
Okay. Oh, there's no goalkeeper.
It was clearly on half and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'll check it. Checking on-field decision of goal. I think let's just go for this. Aye, just make sure there's nothing that we've not missed.
We've got a pitch invasion.
Clear header, yeah. And we've got the time. There's no foul there. It's clear it was on half.
We have a pitch invasion.
Yeah. Don, it's Kevin confirming on-field decision of goal. Check complete. You're nearly.
Hearts are happy to finish, Don. Hearts are happy to finish. Derek McInnes has told me they're happy to finish. So they can get their players off. They want their players off the pitch. The Hearts want their players off. Is it finished? Yeah, it's finished.
Confirming the game is finished.
Okay.
Yeah, confirming the game's finished. We're just watching some of the images.
What did you just say there?
It literally could not be any clearer that the game's finished. And I think that's so funny that you've had 3 or 4 days of speculation, right to your MP, right to Seb Blatter or whoever the fuck's going to do it. Get him out of retirement, dig him up. I don't know if he's alive.
McInnes says to blow the whistle. Hearts happy to finish.
I think you can actually hear McInnes as well.
Yeah.
The funniest bit about it is for everyone that thinks it's a Celtic conspiracy, the deflation is like, there's no goalkeeper. It's just like, there's no goalkeeper.
What do you make of that, Barry? As you said, like that kind of just puts everything different.
Yeah, that's the tin lid on it. You would hope that people would start to relax a wee bit now. I did like the sort of biblical imagery of it is finished. But yeah, just it's always, I don't know why I'm always surprised, but it's funny to hear the sort of pain in their, like Stu says there, their voices. There's no goalkeeper. Oh, that's it. And then like just check that he's in his own half. I'm like, what the fuck? I know. So yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that you can hear McInnes, can't you, saying blow the whistle? I'm sure it's him.
I don't know. I've heard some people say that. I've only listened to it.
Sounds like him, doesn't it?
Even then, he's saying Hearts are happy.
They want the players off the pitch. You can
pitch.
actually hear the engine of the bus getting ready.
You can argue that they've motivated that finish as well. Like maybe Robertson did want to see out the last 20 or 30 seconds or whatever it was, and then he's gone, well,
It's been overruled.
fair enough. The opposition manager said they've quit. They quit.
It's so funny
Tapped
though, like all the statements coming out, Tony Bloom and all that. Like McInnes is probably thinking, shit, I should have probably told them that I said to finish it.
Aye, because obviously, like, the statement that came out on the Sunday from Hearts is very, well, it's thrown out allegations, and we'll get to that as well, but thrown out lots of allegations about lots of different things. Apparently, they heard they heard the audio on Monday, and they just kind of went, oh no. So, true.
I would say maybe that it's because of the big conspiracy that has handed Celtic the title. Maybe they wanted to sort of give folk enough rope to sort of hang themselves with. But, like, why can the SFA not have just released that on Monday?
Because it's a good laugh. Come on, we own them.
It's eyeballs on the product.
Yeah, we own the fucking SFA. Comments. So there's been some interesting stuff this week in regard to St. Martin going on and protecting Celtic, which has been really good to see. So he went on TalkSport, and I'm just going to read out a couple of these quotes. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but Jim White. A debate as to whether the referee actually blew the final whistle. There is a suggestion, still, no doubt, and everyone knew, blah, blah, blah. There's a suggestion that shows a lack of class, that it's tainted the image. Martin Unreal replied, I'm sorry, Jim, I totally disagree with that. I don't know about the confrontations in terms of the Hearts players. There was a lot of hyperbole about that. Let's find the real picture. The fact is, when we scored the third goal, the game was essentially over. There were 8 seconds left, perhaps in the game or whatever maybe. The referee has claimed that he had blown the whistle at the end of it. There's obvious excitement. We have scored to win the league. Jim White then says, yeah, but they shouldn't have come onto the pitch, Martin, should they? Martin O'Neill replies, well, start telling that to every single football club, and then we will hold it. Hang on a second, Martin. Hearts called it an embarrassment to Scottish football. Do you agree that it was? As they might do. I don't believe that. I just don't believe it. I think it's nonsense. And then Jim White just tries to goad him, but Martin O'Neill just holds off very, very well. What's been a delight this week, Barry, has been seeing on social media all of the sort of different kind of fans running on the pitch, whether it be Kilmarnock versus Arbroath, when everyone thought that was great, whether it be, is it Stuttgart or Bayer Leverkusen, whether it be when Brighton got promotion.
Oh, all behind Tony Bloom.
It's just shite, innit?
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly with a tweet. I don't know if it was Saturday night or Sunday, where you said if it was flipped and it had been at Tynecastle, and if the Hearts fans had come onto the pitch, it would have been, oh, look at these wonderful scenes from Tynecastle. And we all know how much of a cauldron it is at Tynecastle. I'd be amazed if there wasn't Godin in our players' faces. So yeah, it's just double standards, and it comes back to what we said right at the top of the show. Like, people are devastated that they never got the ending that they wanted. So they'll do anything to try and discredit Celtic and say we're classless. I noticed. I don't know if Simon Jordan was on another day, if it was the same day, but he kept going on about Celtic being classless, and he's like, is this the first title they've ever won? And that's another thing that annoys me as well. John Robertson, it's just another title. You don't celebrate like that. Like, it means the world to us. And I go back to a comment I made, even though I don't like him, but Jamie Carragher, I remember he said last season when everyone was having their opinion on how Liverpool were treating Trent, and he said, I just wish the footballing world would stop telling Liverpool fans how to support their club. And I think about that a lot with Celtic. They're like, oh, you must be ashamed of it. Like, no, like, that is one of the sweetest. You saw Callum McGregor, Kieran Tierney, O'Neill even said, like, that is right up there with the most memorable league win in a generation. And we're not going to have it tainted, to use the buzzword, with people who don't care about the club in the first instance.
I do think that the term classless, which I've seen a lot, is specifically used as a way to kind of pin on Celtic fans who are obviously of Irish descent, of, you know, immigrant stock. There is a sort of use of that word that really tries to distinguish the difference between them and us.
It's a bit like, remember you used to see the cartoons of how Irish people were portrayed, like ape-like,
Yeah,
and all that.
yeah.
It kind of strikes a chord with that.
Yeah, so class, I think, is used by someone like Simon Jordan very, very specifically. Stuart, I want to come to you. Tony Bloom said, he was quoted on the radio as saying, the final whistle hadn't gone, so no supporters should be on the pitch. The Hearts players were in danger. 1 or 2 got assaulted. It's completely unacceptable behaviour. The authorities will be looking at it. I don't want to say anything more about it than that, but I just want to say how tremendous the players were, blah, blah, blah. Martin O'Neill said today, Tony Bloom has had some reflections himself to Jim White, and he said that 2 of their players were assaulted. If that is the case, obviously that would be a deep apology from all of us at Celtic Park. That has not been proven, however. That hasn't been proved, and that is fairly severe allegations as well. It's not been proved. If it eventually is proved, then there's been a lot of searching around on videos and things, then obviously that would be very serious indeed. But he did use the word assault, and it hasn't been proven. Martin O'Neill obviously did his degree in, he was training to be a lawyer at one point, plead the fifth, is that a thing?
Could be. You ask Martin O'Neill. He won't tell you, you plead the fifth.
Objection?
Overruled. I think it's, language is important, and I think that from a legal perspective, I would be surprised if there's not some pushback against Tony Bloom from the club for that. I think that there are physical abuse, there's verbal abuse. I don't think anyone is disputing there was a lot of verbal abuse going about. Some people have their opinions or whether they think, it's just part of the game, or they think that's crossed the line. However, I think in the context at which Tony Bloom has said assault, he's heavily implied that it's a physical assault. There has been, quite frankly, just like misinformation that was spread from a very early point. We've talked about Andy Halliday saying that Lauren Shanklin had been punched and it was a broken nose, these sorts of like buzzwords that were going around. I think in this day and age, we are now five days removed from the incident, and there hasn't been one single piece of evidence. The incident that you're talking about with Frankie Kent, a fan does lunge at Frankie Kent because Frankie Kent has taken his phone and stamped on it. Now, you can absolutely argue that fan had it coming to him and he shouldn't have been putting his phone in somebody's face, and that constitutes, on some legal level, an assault. Not physical assault, but it will probably be in that sort of wheelhouse. But I think that the implication that fans have physically attacked players has not really been founded. And so that is quite a weighty accusation, and one that I would hope that the club would robustly defend the fan base against, whilst acknowledging, as they did in their statement, that they would have preferred that people hadn't entered the field of play. And I think that moving forward, you probably are going to move to that legislation that they have down south, where it's a crime that's against the law to enter the field of play. Fair enough. If that becomes a thing, then that's a whole side and separate issue. But yeah, it's sort of dangerous territory to be saying something like that.
Surprising that he just came out with it like that. Like,
not a smart move. I know he's a betting man, but I wouldn't gamble on that language.
No.
Very good. Barry, just to kind of finish up with this section in terms of, winning the title, the fallout from it. What's your kind of overriding thought overall?
I think it just kind of it speaks volumes that there is it goes beyond Rangers and Hearts fans, I think, who really do not like Celtic, and I don't want to be one of those people that wants everyone to like us, but it's just been too much. Like, they lost, and similar to what we always say, see when we beat Rangers, normally there's something they sort of hang their hat on. You mentioned the Alistair Johnson handball 2 seasons ago, the cup final where it's more in than it's out, Liam Scales. If teams are wanting to sort of blame something for their shortcomings, I'm happy for them to do that rather than look at themselves, because if they look at themselves and sort of do self-evaluation, then there's a better chance that they'll fix it and become better. So we know, I think we're quite good as a fan base at looking at our own shortcomings, because we know that this is a dog shit Celtics team. And I know their character and all that is not in question because they've dragged themselves over the line. But we know what we need to do to improve, whereas I feel like Rangers and Hearts are constantly looking to blame others for their shortcomings. So long may it continue.
Stuart, yourself, just your kind of final thoughts on the last week of kind of mayhem, other than fantastic scenes at Celtic Park.
Just delighted and relieved that it's fallen in our favour in terms of getting over the line. I think that the fallout from it has been massively blown out of proportion. I'm hopeful that if Celtic get a result on Saturday, that maybe, the team gets their flowers a bit more, because that's going to be an incredible achievement for all that they've kind of come up against this season. And I think that, as you move away from it, you'll probably get, when the World Cup gets going, it will die down. And I think there's going to be so much so much churn at all three clubs that you'll probably end up with a slightly sort of spicier trip to Tynecastle and vice versa next year. But other than that, I think it will die down in a few days' time.
The other news. So we've got some news, obviously that we've covered from the week, but the kind of breaking news today from an overall Scottish football perspective that doesn't affect Celtic at all, but it's Celtic adjacent to an extent, is that Motherwell just tweeted out Jans Bertel Askew has joined the League One side Toulouse. That was this afternoon. Barry, your thoughts on that? Are you surprised that he was? Whether we don't know if he was or in the conversation with Celtic, but did you think it was going to be him?
Part of me did, yeah, and I agreed with what Stu was saying on the agenda on Monday, that you would hope that if it was going to be him, it would be this week, so that we knew we could give O'Neill a send-off, or it would be early next week. But it did still surprise me that he left so quickly, to go there. I know it was kind of rumoured yesterday. And again, part of me is a wee bit disappointed, because I thought that he would be a good fit for us, but you've got to hope that Celtic, if they wanted him, they would have gone for him. But you don't know who is in a position to offer the manager role right now, because we haven't heard from the club in a long while. It's gone back to O'Neill to be the sort of figurehead and the spokesperson for the club. So I hope it's not something we regret. And I hope he does well. But yeah, I would have quite liked him. I just hope that whoever we get now is going to be better at him. And how we measure that, I don't know. Probably with lots of trophies.
Lots of trophies. Yeah. Stuart, he was rumoured for quite a while. As Barry says, the deal got done quite quick, because I think the first sort of rumours were a couple of days ago, maybe it was about last week, and he's gone. It's been a very quick turnaround. What do you think? Where do you think that leaves Celtic in terms of who comes next? Because I think he probably was. I think there was a huge part of the fan base that were excited about the idea of appointing him. But what do you think that does for? Does it changes anything? Do you think the club would have been looking at him thinking, we'll speak to him after the season's done?
I think the fans' perception of it and the club's perception of it were always going to be quite different, because I think that there was enough noise that Askew would be open to the job, that if there'd been a chance of it happening, perhaps things wouldn't have moved so quickly with Toulouse. Obviously, it is a good move for him. Top 5 league, sort of mid-table team that he can go and imprint his style on. So I understand why that's appealing. He also he's been quite critical of Scottish football, some of the decisions. Perhaps he doesn't really want to be around it. I think from a club perspective, we all know who calls the shots when it comes to appointing managers. Do you really think that he's watching Motherwell week in, week out and knows this exciting brand of football and cares? Probably not. I think that he's probably looked at that and gone, yeah, we're not appointing the Motherwell manager, no chance. And where did they finish? 4th? How many games did they lose or whatever? Like, yeah, we're not doing that.
Where did they finish? 4th? Where did they normally finish?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that I would imagine that because it's moved so quickly, Celtic haven't sounded it out. And what it makes me think in terms of our situation, I was never a big Askew in guy, because I do think that it represents a lot of risk from what I've seen this season, as amazing a job as he's done, and full credit to him for that. But I had a nice few days where it was like, oh, it's so good to win the league. I'm excited about the summer now. Whatever happens, I'm buzzing. And now I'm like, oh my God, I think that we're going to appoint Robbie Keane, and I think it's going to be a disaster, and you were going to just set fire to all this progress that we've had and all this good feeling. And at the moment, I can't see any further than Martin O'Neill or Robbie Keane. And obviously there could be a mystery box in the same way that Brendan Rodgers more or less like fell out of the sky when that's not someone that you would have placed as a realistic chance when he came to the club. Well, either time really, to be honest. I just can't see us being that progressive with it. And so I've gone from being quite happy to being more concerned about the summer.
In terms of Askew, I think there's a part of me that's like, okay, I'm glad he's gone early so that it doesn't drag on, Barry. But it's an option that just isn't available now. What do you think? What do you think the timeline will be about appointing a manager? Do you think it'll come on Sunday?
It's weird because part of me is starting to think it might be Martin O'Neill as a sort of give us a year to get our act in order. And if that was the choice between Martin O'Neill and Robbie Keane, I would take Martin O'Neill all day
100%
long.
every day of the week.
But I don't know. I would hope that the first week in June you would hear some news, regardless of who it is.
Can I? Sorry, and I'll come to both of you with this. Do you think, with everything that's happened this season and Martin O'Neill performing miracles, do you think? And I know this is going to sound really bad, right? And I hope it doesn't happen, and I don't think it will happen. But also I wouldn't put anything past this board. That basically we win the Scottish Cup and then Martin O'Neill cuts a promo saying that Sean Maloney and Mark Fotheringham are just as big a part of this and they deserve to have a shot at it. And because Martin O'Neill, maybe the board think because Martin O'Neill's saying it, people will buy into it. And how would you feel about that?
I'd be devastated. It would feel like...
Do you think that sounds realistic?
Potentially with the board, but I don't think they could do that. Like, that presents a bigger risk to me than the risk that you mentioned with Askew. And it would just, what I hope, obviously I hope we win the game on Saturday, but remember when I think I was at the Gorbals walking into town when the news came through that Lennon had been offered the job. So I hope that isn't something like that. But yeah, it just feels that unless, as Stu says, there is a sort of a name that comes out of nowhere, you would have to start to hear those names, like the sort of mystery name, early next week, because I think, see, we're sitting here this time next week and we haven't heard anything, I would start to worry, because I listened to the debrief on Tuesday and Will was saying like a large part of most football clubs are well on their way to what they want for this summer. And if it gets into the second, third week of June, pre-season, I'd imagine, would start the last week in June. And then we're up against it already. But having said that, I would rather we took our time to get it right rather than just give it to Robbie Keane. So it is. I'm starting to feel what you were saying, Stu, about like I was enjoying myself, and now the dread of what could come is coming next. But yeah, if I was to put a bet on just now, I would say it's probably going to be Martin O'Neill for a year.
Take our time. It's been 6 months, Stu.
Well, yeah, that's it. This notion that we need a year to like let's assess the situation. Like, what the fuck have you been doing if not assessing the situation this whole time, especially when stuff's been bad? I was trying to see the positives in it. Obviously, O'Neill's record this season has been unbelievable, and when you look at the league table for games that he's been here versus not, he's like 12, 13 points clear of the rest and not really kind of touched them. But I don't want to be in a situation where the quality of football doesn't pick up or results start to turn or we botch the recruitment again. I think that there has been an uptick in performances, but we still have a very soft belly, and also this team is just going to get broken apart. There's at least 4 or 5 major components of the team and the success that we've had in the last couple of weeks that are going to go, and that's fine. It's time for that. It will be done at great profit to the club and everyone will go with our best wishes. I don't know that an interim, call it, if it's an official contract or not, it's still an interim period because Martin O'Neill is going to be 75, 76 by the end of that contract. It's not something that a proper serious football club would do. Bringing O'Neill back is not something that a proper serious football club would do, and we've done it and we've got over the line and we've kind of got away with it, but it's not the appropriate thing to do in this situation. He also... I haven't seen his presser today, but I'd heard that he was making noises to the effect that he didn't think he would be back. But who can say? I don't know.
But that's kind of...
He said that multiple times before he left the first time.
Yeah, he also said on Saturday that they'll have a talk about it. I think... this is what I've been thinking about today, about the idea that they're going to use Martin O'Neill again to try and push Maloney and Fotheringham, because they literally are frozen in fear and they don't have anyone else.
Just to answer your question before, there is no chance that O'Neill will do that publicly. Like, I think he's very protective of the Celtic board and the Celtic hierarchy, and I don't think he would put them in a position where...
No, I mean, like, promote them and say, Maloney and Fotheringham, they deserve a chance.
I think
I'm going to be the director of football, or I'm going to be a consultant, but these are the guys, they deserve to have a go at it. Because they were walking together, I know, they were walking together post-match, after the game, on this, they were very together, they were very, like, there was lots of pictures being taken. And again, I'm not making any comment, I'm looking into something that's maybe not there.
I think he just wants them to receive some of the praise, because I think they have done probably a lot of, certainly the coaching and a lot of the day-to-day stuff. I think they'll have been a big part of that, but I don't think that promoting them up to, like... And also this notion that Martin O'Neill's going to be the director of football. Martin O'Neill isn't. He doesn't have the skill set for that. I think the most worrying thing of all, if O'Neill, Maloney and Fotheringham stay in whatever combination, maybe it's just the same team for another year. I know that the circumstances were incredibly difficult, but the majority of that team is what conducted that January transfer window, and there's literally no players, because the Araujo deal was done before he came in. There was no players that were even remotely close to contributing.
Hi. Next week we'll have our end of season awards, which we do every year. And if there's any news in regard to management appointments or anything, we'll obviously pick that up then. And hopefully, Barry, we will be celebrating a double, because it's the Scottish Cup final on Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff. Come on. That's what it's all about.
A classic of the genre.
It's going to be bloody sunny. We're going to have a class time. Barry, as we sit here on Thursday, how are you feeling about the match? What's your thoughts?
It's weird, like Stu and I were talking just before we came on air. It almost feels like the season's already finished in a way, and you've got this to play. Be delighted. I hope it's just, regardless of the performance, and I wouldn't say regardless of the result, because obviously I still want to win, but I hope it's just a celebration of Martin O'Neill from the first whistle. I think it probably will be. And it would just be the perfect end to what has been a rather turbulent season. And everyone you speak to who is a Celtic supporter talks about how long this season has felt. It's felt like 5 years with the amount of drama. It's still crazy to think that Brendan Rodgers was our manager still in this season. So I hope that the shackles are maybe off a wee bit. I'm kind of trying to sort of will it into existence that... See how we performed in extra time in the semi-final, where there was just that sort of, we clicked into gear. I'm kind of hoping that that's how we start this game. What the team will look like, I don't know. I think Kelechi will have a part to play. I think Osmond will as well, after how well they both performed on Saturday. So I'm just hoping it's a kind of party atmosphere, just get over the line, and then the real work begins. So not to wish too far ahead, but I just hope that we can get it done, because we know how much work has to be done after it.
Martin O'Neill was effusive in his praise for the Uruguayan superstar, Mr. Sirachi. Any chance he starts, or do you think it'll just be again another sub appearance?
I think that he might rotate the team a little bit. Lennon was talking today about how disrespected the Dunfermline team have been, and he's right. And I'll probably disrespect them just now, just in that I do think they are particularly big underdogs. I think sort of reminds me a bit of the Inverness Cali final with Ange, where it wasn't really a contest. It was all just very, very straightforward. I think Dunfermline have really, really, really earned their place. It is an amazing story, like what they've achieved, and it is proper like magic of the cup sort of stuff. But I think that the way that Celtic have played and the way that the season has ended, perhaps we can afford to rotate the team a little bit. I think everything was so win or bust for those last few games that it was sort of, you can't risk not playing this midfield three, even. You can't, because whatever's happened with Hatate. I would really like to see Hatate play. I would like to see him start. I would like to see him get his moment, come off, get an ovation, because I do think he'll be leaving the club. I also think the likes of Oxlade-Chamberlain can absolutely start, play a big part in that game, because I think you've got players like Nygren, players like Tierney that are going to go to the World Cup and have had an awful lot of football, and certainly I know that a cup final you go all out and you put your body on the line or whatever, but there should be enough in that squad where players should be rewarded for coming on and making excellent contributions like a Sirachi, and also Tierney doesn't need to be put at risk of missing the World Cup when he's had the sort of effort that he's had over the course of the year. So I'd like to see a few changes, but also I do think that we now know that we've got lots of ways to win a game, and against a lesser opponent then should hopefully be quite comfortable.
We're going to have a full preview tomorrow on the Weekend Update, which will include our good friend Will Glavin. Will be on the Weekend Update. He sent me, I asked him to do a tactical preview, and boy howdy has he given an absolute fantastic breakdown. So we'll be discussing that on the Weekend Update tomorrow with Will. Some really good, fantastic analysis. Craig Bellamy, Barry, could you want to give us an update? Breaking news.
Sounded like he joined us there.
Craig Bellamy!
So Stephen McGowan has said Craig Bellamy is prominent on Celtic's radar as a potential replacement for Martin O'Neill, but they face competition from Burnley. I would be quite enthused by that. I know it's based on very little, but there is something about him, I think, and I like the way he speaks. I loved him as a player at us. Again, we don't need that connection, but he would have it. He as a winner, as a player. What do you guys think on him?
I've been quite high on Bellamy, but then I have a just absolutely dreadful radar for managers that are going to come in and do well. I thought Russell Martin would have done all right at Rangers. I thought Nancy maybe in different circumstances could have done well at Celtic. So don't listen to me, but I like all the noises from Bellamy. I think he's done really well with a very limited Wales squad. I know that they didn't qualify, but I think he's got them playing and with a bit of belief, and you would hope that you can
get them over the line, though, did they? And I'm not being a dick.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. But they have also, this is not the Wales team of like 10 years ago where they have even the likes of like an Aaron Ramsey or someone that you could sort of hang your hat on, not for penalties, obviously. Hello.
Very nice.
Very good.
Hello.
Very good.
But I love his attitude and I love the way he speaks about football. He's like maniacal. He's insane. He's obsessed with football, obsessed with winning. And I think having had a bit of time here would understand the scale and the opportunity. I think that he's obviously spent time at Burnley. He was company's assistant there in a very successful Burnley team in the Championship. So that would be a bit more comfortable for him. But there's a lot riding on Burnley going back up in what's going to be an incredibly competitive Championship next year, especially when they're all spying on one another. You can never really take that for granted. I think Bellamy represents risk because he could come in and flop, but I like him. I like him a lot. So, and I just don't want Robbie Keane to be the Celtic manager. So,
in regard to how I think about it, I have two lists. There's one list of people that. I'm not thinking about this Celtic appointment through anything other than anyone but Robbie Keane. So anyone but Robbie Keane. Because I just think he's. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I think Bellamy is risk. There's a lot I like about him. If he was appointed, I think it would be interesting. So yeah, but I think a lot, and I mean a lot, would be banking on really good recruitment.
Yeah.
And that's the concern. But then again, I guess that's a concern for every manager.
I think that is a very good point to make. One perhaps situation that I would liken it to, obviously Bellamy has experience of being a manager with Wales, but he doesn't have club experience as a manager. But then you remember when we were linked with like Maresca, that was the same thing where essentially he had to go and prove himself somewhere, did so at Leicester, got the job at Chelsea, didn't do a bad job at Chelsea by any stretch, but it's a fucking
Chelsea
insane situation. And then he's the one that's been anointed to take City on. So I think that managers like Bellamy, we talked about this a bit with Nancy, Celtic probably have to get the guy before he becomes the guy, and that represents risk. Of course it does. But maybe with Bellamy you get 2 years of an exciting young manager that's going to go on and do big things, versus do you push the boat out and get Thomas Frank, who's maybe on the way down in his career, he's in a bit of a dip in his career. Like that also represents risk as well. So it's not going to be.
I think it's going to be a British manager, as in I think the manager's going to be played in British football and is going to be someone that the board know. So Robbie Keane, Craig Bellamy, stick with Martin O'Neill, Alex Neil, someone like that. I don't think it's going to be anything outside, because there's so many options outside the sweet sphere of where the Celtic board think, but I think they're so laser focused on English football and all that stuff.
See, on that, like, it's probably, don't know who on the board would be presenting it to Dermot Desmond, but like Bellamy's, I recognise that name. He played for the club. It's like, phone him. Phone him.
Bell him up.
Yeah, give him a bell.
Stu?
One thing that I'll take away from it is that I'm slightly calmer now that they are at least not just about to announce Robbie Keane next week, just because of the source. And I wonder if that's also as a response to Askew going, that the club have been like, better get something out there, that we are looking at a few people. Can they compete with Burnley? Probably not financially, but obviously if you've got potentially Champions League football, that's a very, very appealing for a manager like Bellamy.
Great stuff. It's been a bumper week of content, so check out thecynic.co. You can all the sign up details are there. You can also check us out on Patreon. Search for The Cynic on Patreon and we come up. Editor at thecynic.co. If you've got any questions or comments and you want to know anything about what we do, drop us a line. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at 90 Minute Cynic. As I say, we've got a preview tomorrow. We'll kind of break down what we can expect from Dunfermline, and then on Saturday we'll have a reaction as well. We have a reaction podcast every single game, so check it out. One more to go, Barry.
Yes.
Next week we laugh.
Looking forward to it. Also looking forward to Sunday evening.
Sunday evening is the Cynic live show, completely sold out. Looking forward to it. These two fine gentlemen involved. Barry, we'll see you there.
Yes, looking forward to it, and hopefully it's even more celebratory
Yes.
than it would be right now.
Great stuff. Stuart, again, a pleasure as always.
Yep, thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful season. I've enjoyed the pods. I'm not going to be here next week, so I'll say thank you to everyone for listening now, and see you on Sunday night, and I hope we win the Scottish Cup, really.
Lovely. Great stuff. From Stuart Diggin, from Barry Gallagher, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly, and we'll speak to you down the road.